Good morning. Now time for us to continue our study on Samadhi. Yeah, sincerely hope you have had a nice weekend. Now let's go back to it. First of all, we will do the prayer. Okay, let's sit upright, place our palms together, and concentrate on the prayer below. We take refuge with our calm mental body. We take refuge with Shakyamuni Buddha. We take refuge with all the triple jewel of the 10 directions and the 3 periods of time. Verse 4 in your future, then surpass profound and wonderful Dharma in hundreds of millions of beings is difficult to encounter when thou see and hear it, receive and behold it, and without to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, and without to practice the Tathagata's true way, and without to attain the Tathagata's true state, without that we can spontaneously express the Buddha's understanding, Buddha's view, Buddha's wisdom, Buddha's merit and virtue, Buddha's capability and Buddha's state through our actions, speech, and thoughts. We also vow that all the living beings can enter into the Buddha's understanding, Buddha's view, Buddha's wisdom, Buddha's merit and virtue, Buddha's capability, and Buddha's state all into us. All right. Hopefully, with the energy from the Buddha, we can go ahead. Okay. Now, yesterday, last week, we've learned something. Yeah, you will realize that you will realize that that is the authentic source of the reflection. Now, this paragraph we will go ahead with about when you realize the authentic self, the you. So what happens? So here it is, continues, connect with the authentic, the realize that you, that is authentic source of the reflection. And then once we realize the authentic self, the you, so what happens? Now, I think we can listen to the video first to review and then go ahead. Go this paragraph through, okay? 我们先听一听我们上周所学这2句，然后这一周接着上一周的就是来说明这个 authentic self， 就是当我们真实的意识到真实的自我的时候，会是怎样的一个境界，以及他这里就说了这个是真实的，不是我们上次的时候学到了什么 come to the still point， the still point 的时候，这个 you await further instructions without blah blah and you needn't to change outer world, something about the outer world you needn't to change, hereby, it has some statements here. Now let's go ahead with the video.
Mind only tries to change the outer world to conform with some idea of what you think the path should be. It's like trying to change the image in a mirror by manipulating the reflection. To make the image in a mirror smile, you obviously can't manipulate the reflection. You have to realize the you that is the authentic source of the reflection. Image in a mere idea. If the mind only tries to change the outer world to conform with some idea of what you think the path should be, it's like trying to change the image in a mirror by manipulating the reflection. To make the image in a mirror smile, you obviously can't manipulate the reflection. You have to realize the you that is the authentic source of the reflection. If the mind only tries to change the outer world to conform with some idea of what you think the path should be, It's like trying to change the image in a mirror by manipulating the reflection. To make the image in a mirror smile, you obviously can't manipulate the reflection. You have to realize the you that is the authentic source of the reflection.
Yeah, that's what we learned last week. I think, yeah, we can go ahead and listen to it, okay? Okay, I think we can stop here and read it first. And Daisy, would you like to read these two sentences?
Yes, thank you.
Read it, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Slowly and slowly try to understand it at the same time. Okay, simultaneously.
Yeah, okay, thank you. If the mind only tries to change the outward to conform with some idea of what you think the past should be, it is like trying to change the image in the mirror by manipulating the reflection. To make the image in the mirror smile, you obviously can't manipulate the reflection. You have to realize the you that is the authentic source of the reflection.
Yes, Ines. So clearly you read it and I can follow you to understand it. Yeah, thank you. And let me check the name list. Okay, next one is Jing. Would you like to read it, please? Read it through.
Okay.
Try to understand it when reading, okay?
If the mind only tries to change the outer world to conform with some idea of what you think the past should be, it is like trying to change the image in a mirror by manipulating the reflection. To make the image in a mirror smile, you obviously can't manipulate the reflection. You have to realize the you that is the authentic source of the reflection.
Genius. Yes, thank you so much. Next one is Joy. Hello, Joy.
Yes, okay. If the mind only tries to change the outer world to conform with some idea of what you think the past should be, it is like trying to change the image in a mirror by manipulating the reflection to make the image in the mirror smile. You obviously can't manipulate the reflection. You have to realize the you that is the authentic source of the reflection.
Wow, genius.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, let's go ahead with this paragraph. Okay.
If the mind only tries to change the outer world to conform with some idea of what you think the path should be, it's like trying to change the image in a mirror by manipulating the reflection. To make the image in a mirror smile, you obviously can't manipulate the reflection. You have to realize the you that is the authentic source of the reflection. Once you realize the authentic self of the reflection, once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change. What changes is the conscious, intelligent inner energy, or prana, which is freed from conditioned patterns and becomes available to be directed by the soul. You can only become aware of the soul's purpose when you are able to watch the conditioned self and its endless pursuits, and let them go. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change. What changes is the conscious, intelligent inner energy, or prana, which is freed from conditioned patterns and becomes available to be directed by the soul. You can only become aware of the soul's purpose when you are able to watch the conditioned self and its endless pursuits, and let them go.
All right. Yeah, this paragraph seems, yeah, seems easier because there is no, maybe no, and no new word. All right. Yeah, let's go back to the sentence 1. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change. Okay, what changes is the conscious, intelligence, is the conscious, intelligent inner energy, in conscious, intelligent inner energy, or prana, which is freed from conditioned patterns and becomes available to be directly by the soul. You can only become aware of the soul's purpose when you are able to watch the conditioned self and its endless pursuits, and let them go. So that's it. All right, let's go back to the sentence 1. Listen to it carefully. Okay, the whole paragraph's meaning. Okay, what does it mean? It means that 一旦您真实觉悟到这个真实的自我的时候，它并不意味着这个外在的世界因您必须要因您而改变。这是第一句意思。第二句是，就是确实是在改变了的那个是您的意识，这个灵光再现的是您的意识，这是第一个名词啊，第一个意识或者您的这个 energy， 这个 energy 前面有2个形容词是 intelligent inner energy， 那就是说是一个灵光再现的，是非常非常就是那个灵妙通光的那个有灵气的 inner energy， 就是内在的灵光再现的这种能量，以及 prana 就是我们所说的那个 138Samadhi， 就是这种境界 138Samadhi 就是萨摩地，就是那个阿耨多罗三藐三菩提，就是正知正觉的这种境界 which is free from， 这些境界呢，他们都是free from conditioned patterns， 他们都是从这个，他们不受于这个外在的有形的这个约束，and 外在的 conditioned patterns 也就等于 conditioned self。 You is a pattern， 就是我们每个人都有自己的这种外在的这种型号，而且每个众生的外形都不一样的，所以是各种的形啊欲形就是不一样。这是 conditioned self， it also means conditioned patterns and becomes available to be directed by the soul， 也就是这个时候你不受这个外在的这些外心贪嗔痴慢疑以及这个就是自性的烦恼心用的这一些各种形式的约束的时候，您就会变得自由了。 available， 这个 available 是你可能做什么，你变得可能，你就可以被这个自信去指引了。也就是说，这个时候指引您的不是您的情识妄想和烦恼意识，而是这个自信的这个妙善的这个就让它去指引。这个时候 you can only become aware of the self's purpose， 这个时候您才能够明白这个自信的真实的目的，就是它的妙用。when you are 就是什么样的一个情况呢？哪个时候呢？就是当你能够去盯住这个因缘而生的这个自我的时候，就是外在的自我，以及因条件因缘而和合的这个自我，也就是情识妄想参他烦恼的这些自我的时候，以及他无尽的贪求 endless pursuits 就是这个追求，就是跟前面的 cravings 一样的 and let them go， 就只有把它这些东西都放掉的时候，你才能回归到自信，才能够就是那个眼若大多，它是到处 到处去这个满城去找他的头啊，他就是 endless pursuits， 把这个狂性放下来，追随之性放下来，追随之心之行放下来的时候 ，let them go 就是放下来，那这个时候就是显发自信的妙善幻用。So that's it. Now let's go back to the sentence 1. And sentence 1, there is authentic. We need to pay attention to it. I think we can review it and necessarily. Okay, I think this one we need to pay attention to the pronunciation. Okay, I will check it out for you. Okay, sorry, necessarily 这个读音有点，它就是指 necessary 的这个动词形式，不，副词形式哦。我们把它直接的放这里，我就不做标了。这个看。好 ，necessarily， OK， 重音在这个上面 ，necessarily，OK， this the two new words. The first one is authentic, yeah. Last week we learned authentic, 地道的、真实的、正确的，都会有这些意思。我们说他说英语很地道，yeah. You speak English in an authentic way， 就是非常地道的。All right， 这里的是真实的就是真实的自我，真实的我，中我，就是自信的意思。啊，那这个单词就是 necessarily。Okay， first， yeah, Daisy, would you like to read these two new words? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Authentic.
Okay, thank you. Second one.
第二个是necessarily.
Yeah, necessarily. Okay. Yes, thank you so much, Daisy. And next one is Jean. You please.
Okay. Necessarily. Okay. Oh, necessarily.
Here is necessarily.
Necessarily.
Yes.
Necessarily.
Okay.
Necessarily.
Yeah, the pronunciation is really difficult. Necessarily. Yeah. 这个舌头要很快，因为这很
necessarily
就是
necessarily.
Really, yeah, necessarily. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Next one, authentic. Authentic. 把这个舌头稍微伸出来一点点。Authentic. Genius.
Authentic.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. Anchula, you please.
Yes, okay. Authentic.
Next one.
Necessarily. Yes,
yeah, eloquence. You have an eloquent tongue. 就是这个舌头非常的灵活，句子辩才的，很厉害。All right, now let's go ahead with the sentence 1. And Daisy, would you like to analyze the sentence structure and some issues?
Okay, thank you. Okay. This is a compound sentence. And the main clause is it doesn't mean something. And once you realize the authentic self is a adverbial clause led by once. And in this adverbial clause, you is the subject. realize is the predicate, and authentic self is the object.
So how about the main clause?
Yeah, okay. It doesn't mean something, anything needs to change. Doesn't mean. Yeah, it doesn't mean that it is a subject, and doesn't mean is the predicate, and something there is a object clause led by that. And in this object clause, anything is the subject. Needs to change is the predicate.
Yes, you did it so well.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, how about on the outside? What's the part function?
Oh, on the outside is a preposition phrase. Actually, it works as the adjective part in this objective clause. It is to further explanation of anything on the outside.
Yes, yeah, it's gorgeous. I think so. Yeah, thank you so much. How about your opinion,静，您有没有听懂刚才说的这些成分啊、句子啊？
我有些听不懂，我自己的理解是这样的。主句是 It doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change。主句是 It doesn't mean anything needs to change。
对，是这样子的，主句是这样子的。然后它的主句里面就是有一个 that 引导的宾语从句，这个你可以明白吗？可以啊。
那它
至于有个所谓的有个从句的话呢，这个从句当中就肯定是又有一个句子，这个句子就是主谓宾要分清楚，主语就是 anything， 谓语就是 needs。谓语是一个组合的 needs to change。needs
to change， 对，
就是这样子。这个宾语从句可以理解啊。然后我就追问了一下汪老师，我说 on the outside 它的功能是什么？您清楚吗？静
？On the outside 就是外界的些事物。
它是一个翻译正确。
介词短语。介词短语它修饰这个 anything 的吗？
对，正是如此。它是介词短语作为后置定语，就在这个灰色的旋动的部分是作为后置定语来修饰 anything。后置定语为什么叫后置定语？是因为 anything 的问题。anything 它就是修饰它的东西的时候，任何的形容词都要放后面。当然，这个介词更是要放后面，因为介词挺长的，所以是属于后置定语，就是放后面的这种定语。然后来修饰这个前面的名词 anything， 这个名词特殊性是它不定代词 something anything 类似于这些。
是的。
All right, perfect, that's right. Joy， 你也可以懂吧？这个语法现象。
我不知道这个就是主语用什么英语表示，又是个谓语什么的那些，我就
我们快速的来说它，就今天就学3个，然后以后就慢慢渗透。Subject 是主语的意思，谓语 predicate 是谓语 predicate 谓语，宾语是 object。subject 跟 object 是相对的，就主宾呢，主客的就是主客的这个区别。宾啊，宾客的宾。 这个就是请2位都学习一些，3位啊，陆谦也在，就是主语是这主谓宾先请学一下，就是这3个。我们看 subject、predicate、object， 然后我们每次就请王老师说的时候，他基本上都用到这一些了。subject、predicate、object。All right, this is the grammatic issue， 就是关于这一句的具体的这个语法现象，Joyce应该是懂了的吧？
不是很懂，我对这个句子分析能知道1个2个，其他再细分的话不太懂。
对，您是用西方的思维来学英语的，就是直接模仿。OK，All right, yeah, good idea， 就慢慢学。如果懂的话，就是更适合去写文章和翻译，因为写文章和翻译是要构架、要公式的。All right， 这个 once 引导的是一个什么样的从句 ？Daisy, would you like to further explain, please？
哦，好，谢谢依林老师。once 引导的是一个状语从句，但是我在这里就是感觉这个 once 可以跟那个 when 通用，就当你意识到真正的自我的时候。
Yes，
就是相当于是时间性的一个状语从句。
Yes， 它跟问很像的，它跟问是一样，还跟 if 也很像，但它能够被 if 替代一点问题都没有，那就是它也可以作为条件状语从句。如果它不能被 if 替代，那它就只能做时间。want 跟问是一模一样的 ，You're right。所以说这个时候你是时间状语从句和条件状语从句都可以，就到了这个时点的时候，你才会意识到这个东西。对的，就是一旦或者是我们把这个换成 if， 你看 if you realize that it takes up， 是吧？也是可以的。就假如你真实的意识到了这个真实自我的时候，它不意味着什么，这个也可以的。所以这个 once 就是它是2个，它可以等于问这里的啊，它等于问，它等于 if， 它是引导的条件状语从句，条件状语从句更好，它的写法就是 adverbial parts of condition， 这就是表示条件状语从句的这个英文的说法，了解一下就可以，能听得懂就行。就我们在表述的时候能听得懂就可以了。All right, yeah, perfect。就是刚才说了一些语法的问题。All right, now let's go back to the shadowing.
Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change. What changes is the conscious, intelligent inner energy, or prana, which is freed from conditioned patterns and becomes available to be directed by the soul. You can only become aware of the soul's purpose when you are able to watch the conditioned self and its endless pursuits, and let them go. Self and its become aware of the available to be directed by the soul. Path needs to change. What changes is the conscious entirely needs to change. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
OK， 这个语法我就先擦掉它。好，帮大家好读它。好，这一次我们一起来听它，然后把那个重读的音节的地方找出来，重读单词找出来，这样子会利于我们 shadow 就跟读。shadow 就是影子一样的，像影子一样跟着这个声音，就是跟读的意思。shadow it, OK。
Once you realize the authentic self, It doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Okay. So here, once maybe you can think because this is at the beginning of it. 就是在 once 是一个副词，也可以认为它的功能是一个就是连词，你也可以认为它是重读，因为在开头和结尾基本上很多词副词引导词会重读。You realize 实词动词，所谓的实词就是有实在意义的。The authentic self。OK，authentic self， 这些都是实实在在的名词 ，self 是名词 ，authentic 是形容词，都是有实在意义的。It doesn't mean mean 就是动词，意思意味着 anything on the outside。Yeah, this 名词 they are necessarily needs to change. Okay, change is 动词。Now that's it. Let's double check.
Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Yeah, that's it. Hello, Daisy. Would you like to follow it? Share it away.
Yeah, thank you.
Play it for you.
Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Yes, you please.
Yeah. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change. Thank you.
Yes. 一直把爱丽丝拦在门外没有顾她。Okay, next one is thank you so much, Daisy. You did it so well. Yeah, exactly. 一模一样 exactly the same. And next one is Jin. Okay, I will play it for you. Okay.
Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Yes, please.
Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Wow, yeah, genius. It is so well. Okay, thank you. Next one is Joy. Hello, Joy.
Yes, okay.
I'll play it for you, okay?
Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Yeah, try to do it.
Okay. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Wow. Genius, gorgeous. You did it so well, young, in an authentic way. Okay, next one is Alice. Hello, Alice. Sorry.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, Enid. Good morning.
Yeah, sorry to be late to open the door for you. Okay, I will play it for you.
Okay.
Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Yes, please.
Yes. Once you realize the outside, once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Yeah, 这个是有点难读，您看一下再读一下好吗
？Necessarily. 哦，惭愧，我以前
起调的时候起轻一点。Necessarily. 如果是 necessarily， 它两个就是并列的，就是它的重音都在一样的声 necessarily， 可以感觉出来吗
？Necessarily, yeah, okay. Necessarily.
Yes, perfect. Once again, please.
Okay. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily leads to change.
Genius. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, time for us to recite it. Are you ready, Daisy?
Yes. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything outside the world necessarily needs to change.
Oh yeah, something has changed. You changed a little word. Once again, please.
Okay. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Yes, necessarily needs to change. So you realize it, right?
The proposition, right?
刚才的时候您
On
说
the outside.
对 on the outside 你说 outside world okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Don't worry. Yeah, okay, did it. Thank you. And next one is Jin, you please to recite it directly.
Oh, okay. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Whoa, bingo.
Okay.
您的记忆就开发出来了。以前本来是学业很好了，中间可能就是没有学英语，现在都跟上来了，灵光再现。Yes, thank you.
是的，因为这段时间这个句子比较长，然后都当场学会都没有把握，所以我都课前预习了，然后课后复习了一下，就现在比较快一点。
难怪哦，也好啊。
是，对。
Excellent， 太优秀了。Okay, thank you. And next one is Joy. Would you like to recite it?
Yes, okay. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything necessarily needs to change.
So what kind of anything?
对，我再背一遍。
Okay.
Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change.
Bingo. Yeah, you did so well. Thank you so much, Joy. Next one is Alice.
Yeah, okay.
Please.
Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily leads to change. Yeah.
Yes, genius. You did so well. Necessarily, you did. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Okay, I will do that. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change. Okay, recite it. Once you realize the authentic self, it doesn't mean that anything on the outside necessarily needs to change. So that's it. And time is up. Thank you so much for your time, for your patience. See you tomorrow. Bye.